So it's apropos that we end the first night of the Fletcher Ideas Exchange with the very man who is this architect. Now, Professor Mihir Mankad teaches arts and communication, one of the most famous classes here at the Fletcher School. But before he came to Fletcher, he worked as a consultant for McKinsey, and then he spent several years as a national TV news anchor in India, and he worked on the Clinton Foundation in India. He's not only a great role model, but a fantastic friend, and before you go, we are going to say a bit of words of thanks.
So this is a surprise to Professor Mankad, to slightly embarrass him a bit. But we just want to make sure that you're all aware of the amazing contributions he makes, not only to the Fletcher School, but to Tufts University as a whole. He's not just the professor of arts of communication. He lends out his time to help any student at the school interview for a consulting position, for any other position they may be going for. He's given lectures to undergrads and Fletcher students alike about what it's like to be in the consulting business. He's also just been there for the student community for whatever they need in terms of communication, in terms of believing more in what their ideas are and how to communicate them most effectively. I think Leland and I are especially grateful for being selected as TAs this semester to be able to both help current Fletcher students learn how to communicate more effectively, but also to learn from them their amazing ideas as well. And I think Leland has a couple of more things to say, but.
So we have a special gift for you. So first, come here. And let's get a big round of applause. So Professor, you've seen many of us give speeches a million times, and now we are very excited to see the master in action. So without further ado, let's welcome Mihir Mankad talk about social change television.
Yeah, so I thought I could get by listening to 600 of your speeches and never making one myself. Almost happened. Okay. Let's see. I talk about nervousness, but I'm feeling it right now myself. Okay? So let me start with that eye contact I preach and see if it really helps. Okay. Today I'm going to talk about something very close to my heart. This thing right here, a television. It evokes some interesting emotions from people. Different words come to mind. In fact, a very common frame, especially in environments like this, in universities, is that of an idiot box. It's almost the antithesis of intellectualism. You pride yourself when you don't have a television at home, and for good reason. Here, if we want information, we can get it from the internet. Okay? Broadband is all you can eat. Right? Makes sense. But for a large portion of the world, in fact, for the majority of the world today still, the television is a window to the world. Sometimes, perhaps, the only window to the world. A window to entertainment, a window to news. And I will argue today that it's probably one of the most powerful social change catalysts that we have. Now, like some of our speakers here today, I grew up in India. Interesting things, right, that people have done to access television. It's an equalizer. It's the same programming that goes to the skyscrapers that comes to the slum areas. People consume this medium. There are more people watching. There are twice as many people watching as there are television sets. Okay? But growing up, I used to come out of watching Bollywood films and good shows that were mostly about entertainment, feeling motivated. And most of the films that were successful, that were well made, tended to be Bollywood action films. So I would come out of the theater motivated to fight people, right? To kick and to become martial artists, right? But could the same visual medium elicit different emotions? I wondered. Okay? I wondered whether entertainment and social change television are at the other ends of the spectrum. Traditionally, for-profit television and Bollywood films were made with a different sensibility and by a different type of channel than public service programming, which was relegated to more of the national broadcaster, was often fun-constrained and dry. Was this a chicken and egg story? If you think about this more, is entertainment the antithesis of education? Does engagement not mean that it can be about a social change platform? Importantly, does social change programming need to be seen as a charity, almost by organizations who have a corporate social responsibility where they say, 2% of our budgets, let's just do this? Or can it be sustainable? Can it be profitable? I wrestled with these questions each time I came out of a moving Bollywood film or a great show. And I think this question was answered in 2012 by a show anchored by this man. This is Amir Khan, one of Bollywood's biggest stars, who made his first foray into television and became only the third man from India to be on the cover of Time magazine. Actually, the third actor from India. He was part of this show that caused a revolution by bringing in edgy programming, by bringing in for-profit sensibilities and an investment that had not been seen in social change television before. Now, part Oprah, part 60 Minutes, this show took on some of the most hard-hitting social change issues in the country. The first show was about female feticide. If you take a look at their website and you see the first 13 episodes of season 1, they were on issues like female feticide, child sex abuse, untouchability, alcohol abuse. And what was interesting is that each show, each 1-hour episode, was made with the planning, the budget, the sensibility, and the determination of making a commercial feature film for the first time. This is an example from the show. So there are vignettes. Typically in a show on, say, female feticide, there are 4 or 5 vignettes. And then the celebrity would bring a person on in the studio, much like Oprah. And then you could see the reaction both from the audience as well as this is a clip of people watching the show. This was on female feticide. The woman here says on national television that her family had asked her to get an abortion 6 times because it was a female fetus. Now, clearly, some of the sensationalism, if you will, was brought in, perhaps for viewership, but that was okay, right? It was using those sensibilities that stir emotions in films to bring it to the show. As I think Arslan mentioned, who was here in the audience earlier, he has himself watched one of these shows where they actually brought on the in-laws of this woman who was cast away because she didn't have dowry. Now, they agreed to come. Clearly, it made for some sensation, but the issue was brought out. This show was watched by 600 million people in 3 seasons. Okay? What was the mix that made the show both entertaining but got the word out? Okay? And so if you do a case study of it, people start and stop with the person. Okay? Not only was Amir Khan on the cover of Time Magazine International once, but then he came back on the cover of this magazine as the 100 most influential people in the world. You can see the list right next to him. Clearly, this was a huge win. You got the right person, right popularity. He'd already made a couple of films. He knew how to interact with the audience. He gave it his 100%. Okay? But that was just one of the peas in the mix that worked. The thing about Amir Khan that came out in an interview that the CEO of Star had said is that people think about Amir Khan as an actor, but they don't talk about him as a producer. For one year, this man, who could make a $20 million film, did nothing but focus on this show. But if we're talking about the first P, which is a person, there was another person for which the stars align. Probably the most powerful media man in Asia, the CEO of the Star Network, himself committed to hitting the show out of the ballpark. A great anchor, a great person with resources. And a couple of quotes in this interview that he said is, look, when we started off on this venture, we didn't want to just make another episode on female feticide. We, as a team, wanted to eradicate it from the country. Okay? For every person that you saw in the studio in this show, right, there were about 100 people that were interviewed to find the right person. Throughout these 13 episodes, you will not see a production flaw. We watched this show. Right? And so again, the planning of for-profit brought to nonprofit, and then what was the impact? Right? In terms of placement, right? So one is you get the formula right. Second is placement. When do you want to show a show like this? 11 a.m. on Sundays and across every Star channel in 7 languages. Start the dialogue. The entire family is watching. Not just that, get the traditional national broadcaster who was making drier programming, fund-constrained programming, to simultaneously air and give this free of charge to the broadcaster. So the entire nation is watching. Tweets, I can't wait for 11 a.m. today. Okay? For hard-hitting social issues, yes, you can't wait for Game of Thrones, but to wait for the next show on alcoholism? Right? Never saw Mumbai so empty even on Sundays. Placement. In order to work the sensibility that let's give this to the national broadcaster because they have terrestrial reach. Cable channels don't reach rural areas. Okay? Let's make screenings. Look at this picture. A picture speaks 1,000 words, right? You do something well on social change programming, you will get people queuing up waiting to watch the show. Promotion. Clearly, you need promotion for everything. Outside of the regular promotion in terms of how the show was marketed, advertised, there was also another element of promotion, is tracking. Okay? There was an agency set up right before the show went on air to track every tweet, every SMS. Most people in India do not still have broadband access. What is another way of tracking? Votes for change. Call, give a missed call, and we'll count your votes for change. We will track it. Okay? Analytics. 1,000 people analyzing this at the same time. Okay? Let's do something. Let's do it. Let's put the investment. Let's do it well. Petitions. Vote for change across on sexual assault, right? On water, on healthcare. Specific things happening. 2 cases went to the Supreme Court right after the show on age-old issues. A petition here with the Prime Minister, a star motivated, not just to do this, collect his paycheck, feel that, oh, I've done my part, now on to the next film. Let me follow up. 3 years later, let me have a meeting with the Prime Minister of the country on petitions. And price, folks, sustainability. Initially, no sponsors, there'd been no one who'd generally come forward for something like this. Now, multi-million-dollar sponsorships. It's hard to get the exact numbers from the organization whether this venture was profitable or not, but Wikipedia lists all of these sponsors, right? Paying $2 million for the chief sponsor, $1 million to be part of this exercise. Okay? Now, the stars aligned for Satyamev Jayate. Okay? They may not align like this for many other shows. But importantly, it showed that this can be done, that entertainment does not have to be the opposite of social change programming. This is a macro example. Can it be replicated? Perhaps, and rarely, but it can. What about a slightly more micro example? Okay. Another show in Afghanistan called Niqab. Okay. And the Niqab is a word for veil. Now, this was put together not by the CEO of Star and a major Bollywood star, but a 28-year-old motivated man in a makeshift studio. Sami Mahdi created a show. He was motivated by this, by his mother's, just by his mother's inspiration, to give a voice to women. And he said women will come on the show, wear a mask, and talk about their domestic issues that don't generally have a voice. Sexual abuse, assault, whatever, that was going on. But it wasn't possible to do that by without the mask, okay? Makeshift studio, this intervention got a lot of media attention. Post-Arab Spring, this region, anything coming out that was solid, well-produced, with the right sensibilities, got attention. This man took 2 years out of his life to create the show. Not a whole career, okay, but was able to create impact. He's been honored by Hillary Clinton. He's been honored with most of the fellowships in journalism. Now he has his own channel. Okay? But an accidental social change programmer. What if you have lesser time than this? Can television give you opportunities? Let me share a personal story here. I was very fortunate to grow up in a family where both parents played sports for the country. But interestingly, they played sports at a time where they had to work on the side to make ends meet. My mother won the nationals for 14 years, but was felicitated by the prime minister, but got a cash prize of 65 rupees, or $10 at that time, and a plane ticket to the US was still over 1,000 rupees, right? So while she had a good life and she coached after, I was motivated a bit by her story and why, despite 14 years being good enough to win nationals, why female athletes were still not getting the exposure and the sponsorship to continue their sport. I held on to this. And years later, when I had a chance to host the Commonwealth Games amongst the different multi-sport events, there was another opportunity that came up instantly. The Indian women's 4x400 women relay team scored an upset victory on national television in front of a home crowd in Delhi. Okay? This was a great moment. People celebrated it. They beat England, Australia, Nigeria. And there was a time where the country was celebrating. But there were also 100 other events and thousands of other athletes. At that time, there was a research intern who had worked for the national broadcaster who said, by the way, did you know that one of these women didn't even have shoes a year before these games? And that all 4 of them came from very small towns. Now, as a kind of a quick reaction to that, we talked to the producers and fought for 5 minutes to do a little vignette on this women, okay? And basically, right after that, the next day, out of everything, newspapers carried stories, media articles came up, and sponsorship came through. Okay? Point here is just even being around the medium, even for a short while, it has the power to connect. When the whole country is watching, if you can use those moments to both entertain, but then create something well, it will have an impact. From micro to macro to everyday, 2 thoughts to leave you with. First, it's been illustrated by Malini and a number of people, film is powerful. Most of the students in the Arts of Communication class, the first time this year, when they say you have to make a video film for 5 minutes, they cringe. Like, I don't want to deal with, I'm not going to be on video. I don't want to deal with like software and editing. But this film, just the medium by itself, has a tremendous power to stir emotions, to connect, right? To share stories. And there's power in stories, and inspire people to take action. But I would also say outside of film, which has its own distribution issues for the group that you want to get it to, television still has incredible reach. Many people around if you talk about broadband usage, it's high, the numbers look high, but you're not going to watch a film on your phone because you're paying for broadband. The average cost for broadband for a year is a good fraction of the per capita income still in developing countries. Right? It is accessible, it is affordable for this reason. Right? It is a non-invasive medium. You're not going out pushing things to people. Take this medication, this will help you. It's non-invasive. Appreciate that power. To touch those that need to be touched. Right? And lastly, for all of you, it can be a compelling career choice. You don't have to become an anchor, right? But if you're considering consulting and impact investing and World Bank, whatever, how about television? If your goal here at the Fletcher School is to reach out and impact lives around the world, why not this medium? It's intellectually stimulating. You can be behind the camera, but just like that research intern who had come in and spurred the idea, in a shot, you can have huge impact. So perhaps I've left you a little bit of food for thought for a powerful social change mechanism, and perhaps the not so idiotic box, television.